Those people, John, who would criticise you and say that you must have something against the royal family, what would you say to them?
Oh no, I don't have anything against the royal family. I think the evidence actually points to the motive for Diana's death being either her involvement in landmines, which is not directly related to the royal family, although they may have had investments in that area, and where she was seen on TVs right around the world walking through these minefields and then calling for the complete eradication, banning of landmines. So that's a major factor, I think, and the other factor is the relationship with Dodi Fayed. So that does relate to the royal family, but I just sort of have written these books based on wherever the evidence leads, and there's no. I've never had any preconception that the royals were behind it. I don't. At this stage, I don't know who was behind it.
Good. Latterly, a witness has come forward claiming that prior to her death, Princess Diana was about to become engaged to Dodi El Fayed, her lover. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of evidence that points to engagement. Even before this witness came forward, there was substantial evidence pointing to that they were going to get engaged, that friends of Dodi and friends of Diana, both lots were saying that an announcement was going to be made, or they had news. They had news that they wanted to share when they got back to the UK, which they never made. But had they got back to the UK, there was some news that the couple wanted to share as a couple. So it certainly that indicates that there could have been an engagement coming up. But there was a lot of evidence around an engagement ring. And there was an engagement ring, and there was no doubt about that. There was a ring that was purchased, which came from Alberto Raposi, a jeweller in Monte Carlo and in Paris, and that ring came from the Tell Me Yes range of rings, which was an engagement. That was an engagement ring, and that was purchased. That was definitely purchased by Dodi on the afternoon before the deaths, and. So the witness that came forward recently, her name was Trixie Chow, and she's a journalist, or she was a former journalist who used to work for the Bild in Germany, and she was living in Monte Carlo in 1997, and she happened to see, and she's the first witness to come forward who's actually said that they saw Diana and Dodi in Monte Carlo on their own without bodyguards, walking up the road towards Alberto Raposi's, and then she, because she was a journalist, she was very curious. It was already on her way home anyway, so she followed them from the other side of the road, and she saw them looking into the window, and she saw Diana point to something in the window, and then she saw them walk into the shop. So that's the first witness in Monte Carlo who's actually said that, but it does fit with evidence from a woman who was on the Jonacle, the yacht that they came off, and she said, I just can't remember her name at the moment, but she said that she saw Diana and Dodi leave the yacht in the tender from one end while the bodyguards were up the other end of the yacht. And the bodyguards were furious when they found out they saw the tender going off of Diana and Dodi. And so you've got a witness there saying that she saw them leave, and then you've got another witness now on the shore who said, I saw them as they came ashore.
Into the jewellers, yeah, exactly. So, okay, now the big question. Who do you think is behind the cover-up and why?
Yeah, well, I think I'm still investigating, so I can't really be absolutely certain, but the evidence that I've seen points to intergovernmental. So you've got the French government, you've got the British government, and there's evidence too pointing to the US government involvement, because Bill Clinton, who was the president at the time, Diana had been in talks with Hillary and Bill Clinton, and she was very involved in the anti-landmine thing, and she had spoken to them, and Bill Clinton had actually said that the US would sign a treaty, which was signed on the 17th of September 1997, so it was 17 days after the crash.
Right.
And before Diana died, he had agreed that he would sign that treaty, the US would sign that treaty. Then Diana died the 31st of August, 17 days before the treaty, and in between that time, Bill Clinton made an announcement saying that the US had withdrawn from signing the treaty and would not sign the treaty to ban landmines. So there's a sort of, the circumstantial evidence points to maybe there was a US involvement as well, because the US still haven't signed that landmine treaty, and that's 14 years later. Right. So there's obviously a big arms interest there, arms dealing interest, and the thing is with Diana and the landmines was that she wouldn't have stopped at landmines. Like, she was a humanitarian person, so she would have been looking at crusader, wasn't she? Yeah, and she would have been looking at cluster bombs, and she would have been looking even at probably bigger weapons, nuclear, whatever. You know, if she had stayed around, she would have been a huge force against the proliferation.
John, your own life hangs in the balance. You're a very ill man. You're suffering from a life-threatening illness. Is it a case of publish and be damned?
Oh, well, yeah, well, I suppose that I'm influenced by the illness, so I want to get the books finished before before I die, but it's just that, it's like, I wouldn't be writing these books if I didn't have the illness, because, so it's a sort of, it's a situation where because I got sick, I had to retire. Yes. And so then I was looking at, it took me a while to come to terms with that. It took me 6 months or a year, but after that I thought, well, what am I doing? What can I do? You know, because I was sort of sitting here and very limited in what I could do.
And so, truth is very important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a very important factor to you. It goes back to even when you were a young man, and then you subsequently wrote a book, of course, on the cult that you were involved with. So truth is very much a very vital element of your life, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, you know, with this inquest, the books and that, I've tried to sort of just follow the evidence and put out the truth, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's not the truth, and mainly as a result of the investigations which have been, you know, when you look at the investigations, the way they were carried out, even the inquest in London, it was very, very badly done, you know, and it's just a question of forensically studying what was said and how the judge ran things, and then what the witnesses actually say compared to their statements, you know, things like that. At the inquest, you know, like the witnesses made statements, eyewitnesses who saw what happened in the tunnel, they made statements that night. So the crash happened at 12:30 in the morning. Witnesses were giving statements before even dawn, and those statements were not shown to the jury at the inquest. Right. Instead, they'd have the witness there trying to recall what happened 10 years earlier. Right. You know, and the judge said, the jury said, "Can we have the statements?" Yeah. And the judge said, "You can't have the statements." And I mean, this is crazy.
Absolutely.
How can a person recall something that happened 10 years ago?
Of course.
They've got statements there that were done within hours of the crash.
Which would be fresh in everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
The lawyers had them there, and the lawyers could quote from them,
Yeah.
And they could say to this witness, well, like the witness might say something and that didn't add up. So the lawyer would say, well, at the time you said this. But the jury were not allowed to see the statements.
Yes,
you know, they just had to rely on the lawyer might pick something up and say something. But
how confident are you, John, that the truth will come out ultimately?
oh, I think it will come out. It's just a question of when.
Yeah.
It's like everything, you know. It might take decades.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best to try and get it out at this time, but, you know, to get the media interest in something which they've said, the media have already said it's an accident, accident, and then even when the jury said unlawful killing by unidentified vehicles, paparazzi, the media said paparazzi. So the media have committed themselves to this story, and now books are coming out saying, well, hang on, this is not right. And so I'm sure that eventually when the records are finally allowed to be unveiled,
yes.
then the truth will come out. Hopefully my books will be part of that.
John, it's a great pleasure having you on 10 Minutes in the Life of, and I wish you all the best in your quest for the truth.
Thanks very much.
It's a great
Thanks,
pleasure.
Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.